Hello, good evening. I was a little bit concerned about doing this topic tonight that I'm going to be talking about, which is self mastery, because this is a topic that I'm passionate about. And I was concerned that I would not be able to control myself. Um, I try to start with a joke. Starting with a good joke, that's a little bit too much to ask. Uh, my name is Dr. Asatar Bear, professor of economics and teacher of meditation, and uh, be talking about um, self mastery and heart rhythm meditation during this class. So, heart rhythm meditation is a meditation method that comes out of Sufism. There's many such methods within Sufism. This is not the only one, uh, but it's one that I've studied and practiced and taught for many years. Uh, and it has some unique features. So with heart rhythm meditation, you're focusing on really developing your breath, on making your breath rhythmic, slow, deep, meaning abdominal breathing. That you're making your breath heart centered and you're making your breath full. So you're really working on perfecting your breath. And we'll practice that in during this session so you get a sense of what this is. Uh, but I want to talk about what is self-mastery and how does one go about developing that. So to provide a little bit of context for our meditation practice. Um, the self-mastery, self-discipline, self-control, willpower, these are all synonyms. And just like the name suggests, it's a very basic power that we all have, but it can be strong or it can be weak, right? Depending on, how much we've developed it, right? And there's many different ways of developing self mastery. So at the most basic level, it is the ability to say, I can. And the paradoxical thing about that is that we develop it by saying no. So the what the Sufis do is focus on where in your body is that ability to say no, that power. Where is that centered? Where is that focused? Um, and the Sufis focus on the solar plexus as being the center of willpower and self-control. Okay, so this is one of the chakras. Like many people are familiar with chakras from yoga, for example. Um, so the solar plexus is one of these energetic centers in the body, uh, and so it's something to keep in mind as we think about this, right? So how does meditation come in here, right? Um, so if you develop self mastery basically by saying no, you are doing that whenever you practice meditation, right? Whatever style it is, um, but particularly the style that we're going to be working on, right? Because you are exercising control in some very fundamental ways, right? So firstly, you want to remain still when you're sitting, when you're meditating, right? Um, now, you know, you can be watching TV and whatever and be still for maybe a while and not even notice it, right? It's the minute that you say to yourself, "I'm going to be still now," that you most want to move, right? So, you know, fighting that inclination, right? Being still by itself is not what has value. It's being still when you want to move, right? It's the saying no that has value, right? So you're doing that, right? You're cultivating stillness in your posture, and a lot of people confront this as a barrier in meditation, right? And say, I wish I could meditate, it sounds great, I would love to catch that vibe, but I just can't sit still, right? um, so there's a trick for that, actually, right? Which is to focus on your breath, right? Focusing on your breath is another fundamental aspect of control, right? Because as Sufism and many spiritual traditions, breath is regarded as the fundamental energy of life. So controlling your breath is controlling yourself, your life, on a very fundamental level, right? In Sufism, the word for breath is nafs, and it's also the same as the word for the self or the ego. So controlling the breath is controlling the self, right? On that, in terms of that understanding. So we're going to be working that with that in our rhythm meditation, really working on really developing the breath, in optimizing the breath, and it's probably going to be quite different than your normal breath. So that takes a lot of concentration, right? Which brings us to our next aspect, right? Controlling your mind. So concentrating on something is also a way of developing self-control, self-mastery. Uh, so meditation works on this in a variety of different ways, right? Um, and this is tremendously valuable. My own experience with it um, is that it's I mean all this stuff about saying no and denying yourself. Oh, I want to move. Why shouldn't I move? Right. Well, the reason is that by doing that, right, by saying no, by cultivating this self mastery, it's tremendously liberating. You feel free in a way that you wouldn't ever feel if you just did whatever, right? Um, you feel a sense of possibility. I mean, at least this is my experience, right? Um, when I challenge myself to I do this all the time with meditation, right? I do various challenges, so like sitting still, like I said, right? That's an exercise, but there's layers to it. How still are you really, right? I mean, are you allowing yourself to move a little bit, right? Do your eyes move behind your eyelids, let's say, right? Do you swallow? I mean, there's layers to this. Um, So, I have pushed myself to sit absolutely still for 2 solid hours, let's say, right? And, to not move a muscle during that time, right? Um, that is, like I said, being able to do that has been, amazing experience for me. Um, after that, I feel like I can do anything, right? And that's a great feeling, right? That's what makes me excited to share this with you. Um, so let's try this out before I say a bunch more stuff. Let's do some of these techniques here, and then you get a sense of it and for yourself, right? So first step is to have the right posture, right? If you're going to be still, you want to choose a posture that is going to be, you know, not unnecessarily taxing for yourself, right? Um, so that means sitting in a way that is upright. Okay, so you're not too far forward, right? This is one of the things I do a lot. Whenever I sit down and sit, I realize like I'm sitting too far forward, and then there's strain on my back, on my neck, right? So I'm kind of as soon as I sit down to meditate, take up this posture, kind of always reminding myself to, bring my head back in line with my spine, right? So that there isn't that strain. Like would I be able to do it? Kind of sitting further forward, probably, but it's strain that's not necessary. It's better to be balanced, right? So just experiment with that yourself, right? Make sure you're not leaning too far back either. If you're leaning too far back, you'll feel it more on the front of your body, right? You'll feel it. I feel it especially in my abdominal region. Okay, so versus you're right in the middle, you don't feel that on either the front of yourself or the back of yourself. All right, so sitting up straight, close your eyes, and you just commit yourself to being still, to focusing on your breath, and to energizing your heart. And you tune into your breath and feel your belly expanding as you breathe in and contracting as you breathe out. Now you're making your breath slower by as you exhale by squeezing your abdominal muscles and breathing out more fully, more completely than you normally do. And then extending your inhalation as well. So you breathe in and your belly expands, and then you allow the breath to continue to up into your chest to expand your chest as well, so that the whole region of your breath is like between your collarbones and your hips, right? That all of that area is, you feel that moving as you breathe. And this is going to feel like more work than you normally put into breathing. So, and that's okay, right? We can breathe much more shallowly than this than we normally do, right? We're trying to really optimize our breath, right? Taking a bigger breath, a fuller breath than we normally do, but also keeping that breath slow and smooth. That's the refinement of the breath, right? We want a balance in our breath here between power, that is the fullness, the bigness of your breath, right? And subtlety, okay? Smooth, quiet, refined. It's difficult to do. It takes time to learn. So be patient with yourself. It's like any skill. Make progress by degrees. Then you tune into your heartbeat. You can feel your heart beating. You put it in rhythm with your breath. So you have the same number of beats on the inhalation as you do on the exhalation. Now, if you are struggling to feel your heartbeat and you place a hand on your chest, or you might press your fingertips on your breastbone. You may become aware then of your heartbeat in your fingertips. This is actually your pulse, but it doesn't matter, right? For our purposes, wherever you feel your heartbeat is fine. You might feel it in your chest, you might feel it in your fingertips, you might feel it somewhere else. Wherever you feel it, use that to bring your breath into a rhythm. In the past, we've worked with a sacred word or a sacred phrase. If you'd like to do that and place that on your breath, that's an excellent way to proceed. If not, you can just count. I like to do an even number of beats personally. I like to work with 12 beats in and 12 beats out. So at that rhythm, the entire cycle of breath takes 24 beats. If your heart rate is in the kind of normal range, 60 to 80, somewhere in there, then you're going to have about one beat per second uh, or thereabouts. Maybe a little bit less if your heart is beating faster than that. And so one breath will take, somewhere in the range of 20 to 24 seconds. So you may be breathing in that rhythm, maybe, three breaths a minute, something like this, maybe a little bit less. This is a much slower rhythm than we normally take, right? Our normal breathing rhythm is maybe somewhere 15 to 20 breaths a minute. So By slowing down your breath, you are slowing down your internal clock. Now, if you do this for a while, everything slows down, right? Your thoughts slow down, and with it, you shed a lot of your anxiety. Even your feelings begin to slow down. You don't find yourself jumping from one emotional state to another. You get distracted and lose track of your breath. You just return to it, keeping up the pattern, keeping up the rhythm. See if you can go a bit further now with the breath. Challenge yourself to breathe out more and then to breathe in more. Make your breath bigger. You can go further with it than you think. And this has a lot of value. By breathing all the way out, you confront fear. We normally carry within our lungs a residual volume of stale air, right? Stale breath. By expelling that, we can bring in much more fresh breath, right? New breath, new energy, new inspiration. But in order for there to be room for that, we have to breathe out first, right? All right, we'll end our little session there. We'll come back and do some more practice in a little bit, but I want to talk more about self mastery. So, the lineage of Sufism that I practice in and study in is the lineage of Hazrat Inayat Khan, who a Sufi master who taught in the West, came from India, but taught in Europe and the United States, and um, and really developed the Sufi path for a Western audience, right? That hadn't really been developed in that way before. Um, so Hazrat Inayat Khan had a very holistic view of mastery, right? Um, and mastery to him was very much it was a like a metaphor for the entire spiritual path, really. So Tazra I kind of was like, you can always develop more mastery, right? That no matter how strong you are in that, you can always be stronger, and that will have great benefit, right? So, how do you do it, right? One set of techniques is related to meditation. Um, like I said, okay, so, and this is a very fundamental way of going about it, right? And that works. Another way of going about it is specific exercises to do in life, right? So, and there's some classic things here as well, right? Like um, getting up at a certain time or going to sleep at a certain time, right? Um, that's not meditation, but it's an exercise, right? I mean, like, what do you have to do to say, like, well, I'm gonna go to sleep at 10 o'clock at night or whatever it is, right? Um, there's certain things you're gonna have to say no to, right? Um, once we get going, we kind of want to keep going, right? So what does it mean to say no to that, right? Well, it's a way of developing mastery, right? Or um, one that's become well known these days, associated with like Jordan Peterson, right? Like clean up your room, you know. Um, and why does that touch people so much? To say that because it's an exercise in self mastery, right? So when you help somebody with self mastery, you're helping them on it in a very fundamental way, right? So I mostly disagree with Jordan Peterson about pretty much everything, but well, that's one thing he's right about, right? Having producing order of whatever kind you want, right, in your environment. That's one of these exercises in self mastery, right? So um, uh, another is to be able to control your temper. Like somebody says something to you, you want to say something back, right? But again, how do you develop mastery? By holding your tongue. Now, does that mean you never say something back if somebody, not necessarily, right? This is an exercise, right? Like you don't necessarily always have to be doing that exercise, but if you take it on, right, it can be very beneficial, right? So now Hazrat Inayat Khan focus on one that hadn't really been part of a lot of the traditional understanding of Sufism or of many spiritual paths, right? Because lots of spiritual paths talk about this and use meditation and even some of the other stuff that I've said to develop it. And Hazrat Inayat Khan focused on accomplishing a goal as being a very powerful exercise in self mastery. So there's a book, it's a collection of his lectures that's called Mastery Through Accomplishment. And, you know, usually like people who teach meditation don't focus so much on the external, right? They focus on the internal. So, the methods that I'm talking about are basically internal things. These are things that are under your control, right? Your breath, your posture, whether you sit still, whether you move, all of this stuff, what you say, that's all under your control no matter what, right? So, in one sense, you have no excuse, I mean, like is somebody making you lose your temper? I mean, let's get real, right? It's you, right? So when we talk about accomplishment of goals, now we are getting into the external world, right? A goal is external to yourself, uh, and you know so Hazrat Khan said, this has a lot of the same benefit as all of our traditional, ways of gaining self mastery, and it also has another benefit, which is then you're actually accomplishing something externally, right? What value it has is, in the spiritual view, right, it is about how it changes you, right? It's not so much about the external goal itself. It's about how you learn, how you change, how you develop as a result of going through the process, right? Um, in general, Hazrat Inayat Khan uses mastery as a kind of shorthand for progressing on a spiritual path, what he calls the path of realization. So, very enormously important, right? Now, I want to read you a quote here, right? Because we've talked about focusing your mind as being a primary way of gaining self mastery, right? And this is also very, very important for accomplishing something, right? If you can't focus your mind, if you can't concentrate, it's going to be very hard to accomplish anything, right? Accomplishing a goal is essentially like concentrating on something, focusing on something over time, right? So here's a quote from Hazrat Khan on this. Concentration, which is the secret of every attainment in life and the chief thing in all aspects of life, especially in the path of religion and mysticism, is a natural thing in love. The loveless will strive for years in this path and will always fail to center their minds on one object, but love compels the lover, holding before their admiring view the vision of the beloved. Therefore, the lover need not concentrate their mind. Their love itself is their concentration, which gives them mastery over all things in the world. The lover attains the object of their love by the power of concentration, and if they do not attain the object, then they rise beyond it. In either case, the lover has their reward. So, um, you know, w- the thing that Hazrat Khan is pointing out here is that there's a kind of a secret to concentration, right? Concentration is difficult, right? Focusing your mind is hard, but there's one thing that makes it easier, which is caring about the thing that you're focused on, right? So that's this. That comes out in this passage, right? Love compels the lover. It's easier to focus on something that you love, that you care about, right? So accomplishing a goal, well, you should be careful about what goal you take on, right? Um, I mean, there's so many different options in life, right? I mean, there's lots of things that one could do, right? But what is the thing that you really feel strongly about? What is the thing that you really want to accomplish, right? That is the thing that might be your goal, right? And it should be specific. It should be something that you're very clear on. What does it mean to attain, right? I mean, like you wouldn't say a goal is not being a better person, right? I mean, because that's more of a process, right? I mean, we hopefully you're always every day maybe slightly better than you were before. I hope, right? Um, but that's not one that you can clearly say, that where it's done, right? So our culture is very much a culture of goal accomplishment, right? Um, like we have school, for example. School gives us lots of different goals, right? We have usually lots of short-term ones. Oh, this paper is due and whatever, right? Um, as an academic, I'm familiar with the structure of school, right? So there's lots of these short-term goals, and then you have grades and whatever that can be a goal, or just finishing a certain aspect of school or whatever. So these are like ones that we have, they're almost built in, right? Um, so as an example, right, our culture really celebrates accomplishing goals. What the contribution of Sufism is to this, right, to Hazrat Khan's teachings, is excuse me, to connect this to the inner level, right? Like, it's less valuable if you accomplish something because other people tell you you should, right? Um, that's not what this is about, right? This is not, spiritual attainment is not about conformity to society, right? It's not about doing the things that are expected of you necessarily, right? It's about self development. Okay. So what you take on, that has power, right? What you care about, what you love, right? So you have to be very careful about what things you take on as a goal, right? Um, Even though you might be in a structure, you might be in school, or have a job, there might be tasks and goals attached to that, right? Um, so maybe that overlaps with what you are taking on, right, as your goal for the purpose of developing self mastery, right? Maybe not, right? Because there are things that we just have to do anyway, right? Like, you know, uh, I might need to heat my house, and I need to chop some firewood or whatever for that. Is that a goal? Not exactly, right? I mean, that's just something I have to do, right? So there's a difference between something that you are taking on specifically, uh, you know, in order to accomplish it, to develop oneself, versus something that is an ongoing process. Okay. um, so to say that there's spiritual value and accomplishment, that you gain self-mastery from that. um, that's different than a lot of spiritual teachings, right? A lot of times we think, oh, spirituality is like, you just let go, and just be. um, and there's something to that, right? But the question is like, well, okay, what are you letting go of, right? How are you letting go? There's a difference between renouncing something, you know, say that's not important to me, right? That goal is not for me. Um, right? Somebody else does it, great. I'm happy for you, right? But that's not what I'm choosing, right? That's fine, right? That's necessary for us to focus on something that we care about, right? There's going to be lots of things that you're going to have to say no to. But you have to think about and be honest with yourself, right? Are you doing that out of sour grapes, right? I mean, are you doing that because you think you feel too weak to attain it? That's not good, right? Um, we want inner power, right? That's not a bad thing to want. I mean, that's a very fundamental human desire, right? Um, Power over oneself, right? That's the purest form of power that there is. that can never be taken from you, right? Are you going to have power over others? Well, that depends on others, right? That depends on external circumstances. Maybe you'll have that, maybe not. I mean, that's a change. It depends on conditions, but power over oneself, right? No one can take that from you. So if you feel too weak to accomplish something, right, then that's something you should look at, right? That's not really renunciation. That's not renunciation that's coming from a healthy place. That's coming from doubt and fear and I feel weak and whatever, right? Um, and the way that the question that you're that's clarifying for that is, would you take it if it was just given to you, right? Renunciation means you say no. Um, Thank you very much. That's not for me. I'm not gonna take it. Right? That's how you know that you've renounced something. You wouldn't take it even if it was offered. Okay. So the part of this is being honest, right? And part of what you do in meditation, especially when you focus on your heart and your desires, is you get in touch with, what is it that I want, right? That's a very powerful question. What is it that I want? And to think, how does this connect, right? What do I want on a deep level, right? Um, there's lots of surface level desires that we have, let's say, right? Um, uh, so, you know, uh, again, a lot of spiritual traditions, or our ideas about them and whatever, tell us that, oh, we shouldn't want things, or we shouldn't get attached to things and whatever, right? Um, I'm not attached. That's a common thing that I hear spiritual people say, right? Um, like as if that's unambiguously good to not be attached, right? Mm. Um, and I always sort of think to myself, "Mm, I don't quite believe you." When I hear that, I mean, whether it's sometimes it's true, sometimes not, right? But I'm always like, I wonder if that's really true, um, or is that just a thing that one is saying, right? It's good to be attached to the things that really matter, right? Like, again, Hazrat Khan talking about this metaphor, the lover and the beloved, right? Is the lover attached? Yeah, right? Absolutely. You know, Attachment is what keeps us on earth, right? That's what, our spirits, on a fundamental level, right, are unbound by that. But it is love that's what attachment is, right? So we want to be like careful about what we get attached to and what we aren't, right? um, so let's explore that, right? Let's do another session of practice, right? So take your meditative posture and tune into your breath, and again, make your breath deep and slow and rhythmic and heart centered. Work on making your breath full by breathing all the way out, squeezing your abdominal muscles, and breathing all the way in on the inhalation, expanding your belly and then your chest, really filling yourself up with breath. Or you might try at the very top of the inhalation, where your lungs are full of breath, just hold the breath. Holding the breath means holding energy, holding inspiration, holding vitality, holding life. Holding the breath develops self control on a very fundamental level, right? You're holding life itself. Even as you release the breath, you try to keep it under control. You don't just let it rush out all at once, but you keep you keep control over your abdominal muscles. So you slow down that flow of breath, keep it smooth. Now you consider what is it that you are, what is it that you really want? Right? What is your heart desire? You tune into your heartbeat and you feel your heart is breathing. You breathe all the way out. You're reaching, reaching toward what? Toward that which your heart is longing for. Try to be specific, but if nothing comes to mind, then you just get into like that feeling of longing. You just try to get into that feeling, right? Because your heart is always longing. It's a kind of fundamental emotion that you have, right? It's part of the wonder of being alive and part of the pain of being alive, right? It's longing is both of those things, it's wonderful and it's also a certain incompleteness there, right? What is my heart longing for? Again, you breathe in and your breath is rhythmic. You're tuning into your heartbeat, counting the beats of your heart or using a sacred word that is repeated as a way of keeping that rhythm. Your heart is always longing to speak to you, longing to tell you what is really important. Well, your heart doesn't always speak in words, right? Your heart speaks in a language of emotion, in imagery, in language that is non-rational, non-logical, right? The logic and this is the realm of the mind, right? Your heart speaks in a song, you know, in in a language that doesn't have that exact structure, right? That is unique to you. And how do you interpret this language? How do you understand what is your heart saying, right? Well, you attune yourself to the energy that you're getting, right? So, well, what kind of thoughts are you having? Your mind generates thoughts. That's what your mind does. But what is the character of those thoughts? What are the thoughts about, right? What are they about on a deeper level? How would you categorize them? We're not mad at our thoughts, right? We're not mad at our minds for generating thoughts. Like this is good. This is a piece of the puzzle. This is a part of the message. But we want to go deeper. And maybe it doesn't make sense right away. I mean, this is a common experience. You're seeking self-knowledge. You want an answer from deep within yourself about what it is that you want, what direction you should go in. And your heart is speaking, but what is it saying? Right? Or maybe you have some doubt. What, is it saying anything? you know, very common. That's okay. You have to be patient sometimes, right? It may take time. I mean, we have gotten so used to ignoring what our hearts say. That's become like our default condition. Because a lot of our culture and what we're taught to do, it's not to listen to yourself on a deepest level. It's to listen to society, right? It's to stay in school, don't do drugs, stuff like that, right? It's to it's to you know do what you're told, basically, right? I mean, that has nothing to do with who you are on a fundamental level that has everything to do with society, right? Um, and that's not real. That's not a good guide, right? That's not how you should live your life. I mean, that's these are society's dictates that are for you know social stratification and to keep the status quo going, right? That's um, what does it mean to really listen to your heart, right? It's a habit that we might have gotten kind of out of, right? Or maybe you hear it loud and clear, but you don't feel strong enough to really listen, or you feel afraid. I mean, that's also very common. I mean, a lot of times we do not want to hear the voice of our hearts, or we want to cover it up because it feels impossible, or it's a challenge, right? Now we have to do something if we if we really listen. So the paradox here is that by being quiet and just listening to your heart and really tuning in, really being open to your heart, you're doing an incredibly brave thing. You're doing, dare I say, a revolutionary thing, a thing that society does not necessarily want you to do. Our society would like you to fit in. Listening to your heart does not necessarily do that, right? That's you're serving a different master there, right? All right, so we'll end our session there. We'll just come back. I have a more things to say about the topic, and we'll do a final meditation, to close things. So, um, I hope you're with me here that self mastery is a good thing to have. It's a good thing to have more of. Um, if you already have some self mastery, that's great, right? That's fantastic. You have a foundation to build upon, right? Um, is meditation the only way to gain that? Not at all, right? There's, like I said, many different ways. Um, Meditation is a good way, though, right? Because we want to make a connection between and our hearts, right? Our hearts have additional information. I mean, like power alone is not enough, right? Because each one of us, we're not the only people in the world, right? What about others, right? Um, what about consideration? What about the interests of the whole, however that's conceived, right? Within your circle, however large or small that is, right? Um, there are times where we are called on to serve others, right? I mean, that's a lot of what life is about, right? So we don't, in using the word power, I mean, I don't want it to be, I'm talking about inner power, right? Not the ability to abuse others or something like that, right? That's not what I'm talking about. There's already too much of that going on in the world, right? So I don't want you to accumulate power to make you a better abuser of others, not at all, right? But by awakening your heart, you have more sympathy for other people, right? You have more empathy. You know, um, you see, well, I could be in this other situation quite easily, right? I mean, and is that would that be good, right? I mean, you awaken your heart to the many injustices that there are in the world, and you start to regard those differently, right? And I'm like, oh yes, I know there's injustice, but I want to make sure that I'm the one benefiting from it, right? No, that's not, when your heart comes alive, that is not satisfactory. Um, so this is, we want to be developing our conscience and our consideration, and to be discriminating about what kind of goal we're taking on, right? Is that a goal that is, first of all, it has to be something that's important to you, right? But it also has to be something that isn't going to hurt others, right? I mean, that's you know part of the awakening of conscience. Okay. Um, Now, I want to talk a little bit about, is again part of Sufi teachings of Hazrat Inayat Khan is that there are types of people who for whom mastery is a very natural inclination, right? Hazrat Inayat Khan calls them the masters, right? Um, does it mean that you're, highly proficient or highly skilled or whatever? Maybe not, right? You might be young in your mastery, right? Um, but it's an inclination, right? An inclination towards, a certain kind of energy, right? Which is like focused kind of outward, right? So it's a metaphor, right? Now there are others whose energy is more inward focused. They are, and Hazrat Inayat Khan uses the term saints for this, right? A saintly energy. So the energy is different, right? This is a person who is more about going with the flow, right? More about sensing the conditions and harmonizing oneself with them, right? Rather than creating those conditions, right? So like the master is the one who, on upon encountering a door that is closed, you know bangs on the door or tries to break down the door, right? That kind of energy, right? The saint might wait for it to open, right? So, is one better and one worse? Not at all, right? I mean, these are just different inclinations. These are different tactics, right? But it's again, the work of self knowledge is to think about, to consider which one of these tendencies is stronger in oneself, right? We are often stronger in one thing than another, right? So for myself, I'm more on the master's side than I am on the saint side, right? Um, when I'm around people who are more saintly, I mean, there's lots of different ways of describing this. Sometimes this is a type A person or type B person or whatever, right? These different kind of personalities, schematics or whatever. Um, So we're not saying everyone should be the same way, not at all, right? Um, we want each person to develop themselves in their uniqueness, right? Not to be like others or not to be in some kind of right. We again, there's too much of that happening. Society already tells us too much about how we're supposed to be. Um, we don't look for that in meditation, right? Meditation is like developing oneself, right? um, Not better fitting into society or something, right? Um, so, okay, then Hazrat Khan talks about another kind of basic type, or a one who is kind of both of these tendencies and neither, right? So the term Hazrat Khan uses for that is the prophet, right? Meaning not like the prophet like Abraham or Moses or Jesus or whatever, not that kind of prophet, but the one who is balanced in terms of that expressive side and receptive side, right? The balance between making something happen versus letting something happen, right? That kind of between creating something, right? Creating something new or going with the flow. Um, a prophet is one who is able to discern, right? Able to kind of choose. Well, I could do either one, right? And then the challenge of that is, well, which one should I do now? What would be right, right? What kind of energy should I employ? Okay. So self mastery is useful for all of these types, right? But they're going to do it differently, right? There's a different way of doing this. So, so for me to give exercises in self mastery to a master type, that kind of person is like, yes, I got you, boom, I love this, right? I'm going to do this, right? A saint might be like, well, okay, I'm going to convince me of this. I like the way I like what you're talking about, but I don't know, so You have to keep in mind there's different ways to do this, right? So, if someone is more saintly and is more like a go with the flow type of person, there is a way to do mastery, to achieve mastery within that, right? You want to think about it more broadly, right? Think about your exercise as being connected to those around you, right? So, again, an exercise which uses that inclination to harmonize. Okay, this is one thing that the saintly type of person perceiving the environment, harmonizing with it, right? So can you think of exercises in mastery which go with that, right? That's the challenge. Okay, for the prophet type, right? That type of person, that's always a person who's always asking why, right? Always wishing to see deeper into things, right? Because and it is capable of doing, again, either energy. Um, but what is right now? What is right given who I am, given the conditions, all of that, right? What is the right energy to use in this situation? Okay. Um, so, something to keep in mind, right? As one, um, you know, goes through life and kinds of what kinds of challenges one gives oneself, right? Um, I'm a big believer in doing that, right? Like I think, whenever you're developing any kind of skill, right? And meditation is a skill like anything else. It's good to have a set of kind of things to achieve within that skill, right? So, for example, I have a whole course on this. If you guys are interested, this is on my Patreon page. This is patreon.com/asatarbear. I offer this whole course for my patrons, and it takes you through this step by step, and it gives you a set of different things to achieve, right? Um, so, like I mentioned, a couple of them related to meditation, um, like the ability to sit still and whatever. So, well, how do you know that you're making progress on that? Well, you set a timer, right? You say, I'm going to sit still for 5 minutes. You start with something that, is something that you think you can do, but it's going to push you, right? Um, and, you see what you're capable of, right? Or you might take a longer term one. You might say, I'm going to meditate at the same time every day for the next 7 days, right? And that's a you know, also valuable, right? It's a different style of thing, right? Because the one is done within the 5 minutes, right? You either have achieved it or not, right? 5 minutes. But the other one lasts a week, right? So that's not something that can be done in one sitting, right? By the nature of what you're trying to do, right? Um, so again, I recommend this, right? Push yourself. The last thing like this I did, I'll share with you guys the last thing I did myself like this personally, um, was I do a retreat every year. I mean, usually like twice a year I do a retreat, and I take, you know 3 to 7 days, and just basically spend almost all the time meditating. um, And, that's always a challenge, right? I mean, it's hard to do this stuff all day, right? I mean, that's difficult. Um, the last one of these challenges I did was a year ago, and said, I'm not going to go somewhere else like I normally do, go away from my life and do a retreat. I'm going to do it in my life, but I'm going to set like a target for how long I'm going to meditate each day, and it was 3 hours. So, pretty lengthy. And I was doing all kinds of stuff. I was helping my mom move and pack up her house and whatever. I mean, like my life was not in the ideal place to do a lengthy meditation practice. Not at all, right? It was very chaotic time. I was traveling, and this is like before, a little bit before COVID hit, right? So traveling, moving, getting all this stuff together is quite stressful. Um, But the challenge was the challenge, right? And it was like I did this for 40 days. So again, whatever way that you push yourself, whatever that is relative to where you're at with this, that has a lot of benefit. Okay, so I'd encourage you to think about that. And you know whether it's an internal thing, whether it's something that's related to meditation, whether it's something that's related to something you'd like to develop in yourself, like I talked about, holding your tongue when you're angry or whatever it is, right? Maybe it's something more subtle than that, right? Maybe it's saying how much somebody means to you. I mean, again, that's if that's not something you're used to doing, right? Um, you're you're saying no to the part of you that wants to hide, right? Your true feelings about somebody else. Um, so, again, I hope this gives you a sense. There's lots of different options for how we might, achieve self mastery. Um, let's take a few minutes and do one more session of practice here. So, we take your upright posture, tune into your breath, work on making your breath deep, smooth, rhythmic, heart centered, and full. Feel your heartbeat and bring it into harmony with your breath. Feel the energy of your heart expanding as you breathe out, receiving energy as you breathe in. Pause at the top of your inhalation when your lungs are full of breath and just hold the breath for a little while, feeling the fullness of that energy. Pay attention to your solar plexus. This is a point that's at the base of your rib cage, or at the bottom of your sternum, the upper abdomen. The Sufis call this the depth of the heart, the center of the will. Consider what your heart is longing for. You should have more power in your life. You should have more inner power. And my wish for you is that it's always balanced with wisdom and compassion. And I know that it will be if it really comes from your heart. Thank you for joining me this evening. We're here every week at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays, 7 o'clock Pacific time. And hope to see you again next week. Take care.